I'm so excited to do this episode today. I just love diving into this stuff, and one of my favorite things to do is literally to go onto the FOIA Act, and I will type in anything that comes to my mind. I will type declassified documents behind it, and guys, no matter what I type, something always pops up. This is just how many experiments that have been done and how many is out there. It'll always pop up FB 6792280 or whatever, and it'll always be information in a document. So today there's not one specific experiment I want to go over. I want to go over a bunch just because, I don't really want to focus on one. And I think my main topic is kind of trying to get people to see that maybe we still are under mind control. And, I think it's important to understand the history of what has gone on, to understand even just how powerful we are and how maybe we have been led to believe that we aren't so powerful. And a lot of these experiments really, show some enlightenment on just who we are. And I feel like these people very much knew that, which is why they started all these experiments. So just to get started, let's just get into it. July 4th, 1966, President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the FOIA Act, which is the Freedom of Information Act. And before that, it was a guy named John E. Moss. He was a U.S. representative. And in the 1950s, he was like, something's going on here, right? He was like, I don't know what's going on with the government, or the CIA. But so he came up with the committee. And they actually started to do like some deep dive and just some investigating, and they were able to bring it to like the courts, and he won, and they ended up having to pass the FOIA Act, which is really, really cool, right? You can even request information from them. So if any of these things that I go through, and it's like one or two of them that I could barely only find literally like one document, and if I wanted to, you can actually request information from them. You could sign out a form, and they have to present you with that information, which I find really cool. Not that I've done it. It literally says when you're doing it, make sure that this information is not already out there. But yeah, so the first one I want to talk about is, let me see, I'm going to be going between my notes and my notes on my computer. So the first one I want to talk about is Project Bluebird. It was one of the earliest CIA mind control projects. Bluebird aimed to determine if interrogation techniques, including hypnosis and drugs, could brainwash individuals. So the experiment details are: Bluebird tested hypnotic techniques on subjects looking to implant false memories and induce amnesia. The project included early explorations into using drugs to make subjects more susceptible to suggestion. One of the quotes taken from this document is, "Can we create an individual who will perform acts against his own will of interest?" And, when I was going through this document, it said something, right? Because this document, what they did was they actually like lured men in. So they hired these prostitutes, and they like got these men to come in, and they tricked them, and they were watching them through a double mirror. And they wanted to just observe them, how they would act on these drugs. And it was all intentional, and these guys knew nothing about it, which is so messed up. But in this thing I was reading, it said we wanted to see if we could create Manchurian candidates. So I was like, okay, because it said Manchurian candidates is people programmed to perform acts like assassinations involuntary. So when I read that, I was like, that's so interesting. So I went to look up Manchurian candidates, and it's actually a book written called The Manchurian Candidates, which is really good if anybody wants to get into it. It dives into like a lot of these just CIA experiments and different things that was going on. And, with this quote right here, right, it says people programmed to perform acts like assassinations and involuntary. I want us to really, really be open-minded, right? And I'm not trying to say anything, and I'm going to try to say it in the most, like, not out of line way. But we need to really look at how many mass shootings have happened, right? Look at the president assassination, or the president, like how they tried to assassinate the president. Look at all these things. Let's take a look at all these experiments and keep this in mind, right? Are we under mind control still? Could this all still be happening and we just really don't know about it, right? you look at a lot of those cases and they all had the same story. They were all rich somehow. They all had these huge weapons and were just doing outrageous stuff. And it's really, really iffy to me. And I question it for years now. I remember telling my family just years ago that, you know, I think all of this is from MK Ultra, that all these shootings and stuff like that. And they were literally livid with me, which I get. But okay, yeah, so that one was called Project Bluebird, and that was kind of a mix between Project Bluebird and Project Artichoke, and it was the precursor for MK Ultra, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard about, right? It's one of the most popular things, but Project Artichoke was really kind of like the same thing. Hypnosis was combined with drugs like sodium pentothal and scopolamine, often causing extreme psychological trauma. Reports state that some subjects underwent hypnosis to act as human robots, carrying out tasks they didn't remember afterward. And what's crazy is a lot of these experiments and stuff, they talk about the wars and how they were controlling people's minds. And, you know, it just makes you think about everything that's happened in our world and like, what do we really know? And what is even true and not true in our world? Like, right? Is everything done by the same people? And I don't know. It's just really crazy to think about. A quote from Project Artichoke was, probes into whether hypnosis and drugs could force subjects to perform acts against basic moral principles, right? So literally making them forget even anything that they believe in, their own moral code, and being able to replace their own thoughts with just different programming and different things is kind of scary, really scary. So in 1952, they had another one called MK Naomi, and this is where it starts to get a bit crazy, right? You had MK Ultra, and you had so many experiments that were part of MK, right? They had multiple MKs, MK Ultra, MK Often, but MK Naomi, it was a joint venture with the Department of Defense, and it focused on developing biological and chemical weapons for use in interrogation or assassination. The experiments were research included testing pathogens and toxins, as well as using chemicals to incapacitate targets. Subjects like sarin gas were examined, and methods for untraceable assassinations were considered. Something from that document that was quoted was, development of a means of biological and chemical incapacitation is crucial for national security. In 1953, you had Operation Midnight Climax. Operation Midnight Climax was a part of MK Ultra. This experiment involved setting up safe houses in San Francisco and New York, where unwitting subjects would be dosed with LSD. Experiment details were CIA agents hired sex workers to lure men into safe houses, where they were observed through one-way mirrors. LSD was administered in drinks, and the reactions were studied, often leading to extreme paranoia and hallucinations. Okay, I think I might have mixed up. This is the one I was talking about earlier when I actually thought this was a part of Project Bluebird, but it was actually a part of, that's right, Midnight Climax in 1953. This one is just really sad, right? Because all of these, it's just like, I can't believe they just would do this to people, right? Without them knowing. And some subjects reported experienced severe trauma or psychosis after their exposure to LSD. A study in this effectiveness of surreptitious dosing and observation with no patient consent. The very next one is Project MK Ultra, 1953. MK Ultra became the CIA's most infamous mind control project, led by Sidney Gottlebille, and aimed to find methods to control behavior through drugs, hypnosis, and sensory deprivation. Experiments, it was on thousands, guys, thousands of people. Do you hear me? This, I'm pretty sure MK Ultra lasted for 4 years. But thousands of subjects, including U.S. citizens and soldiers, were dosed with LSD without consent. She hoped to develop techniques to manipulate individuals' personalities, induce amnesia, or implant new memories. So one thing you have to remember is that we quite literally are like computers in a sense. And the same way when we get an update on our iPhone, the same thing happens in our own life. We have programs, is what a lot of people in the spiritual community call them. And from the time you're young to the time you're older, you always have these programs that are just instilled in you. And whether you know it or not, your subconscious is creating that reality for you through these programs. And they just knew all this. And all of these things that they're doing is quite literally to implement new programs and to get people to do these things for them and to see just how far they could go with controlling people, right? But, this is where the Charles Manson thing comes in. And, I often think to myself, was he really this huge, just terrible man? Or was he under such bad control that he was able to, that they were able to use him as this just source and to control others? And I don't know, it's really interesting. But MK Ultra's aim to give us the means to control individuals against their will, potentially creating unknowing operatives, which is just sick. Sub-Project 68, 1957. It was led by Dr. Ewan Cameron in Montreal, Canada. Sub-Project 68 focused on de-patterning patients. Right, I was just talking about this. Patients' mind to treat psychiatric conditions, but often resulted in lasting trauma. The experiment consisted of Cameron used electroshock therapy 20 to 40 times stronger than standard practice, followed by isolation and repetitive audio messages in sessions called psychic driving. Patients suffered memory loss and complete personality changes. Many patients were permanently impaired, unable to remember family or perform basic functions. The goal is to break down personalities and implant new thoughts. That was a quote from Ewan Cameron, which is crazy, right? I can't imagine that these people were just so okay with you literally make somebody lose all memory of who they are and their family. I don't know. I can't understand how this stuff was happening. What's wrong with these people? So MK Delta in 1960 focused on using MK Ultra techniques abroad, testing drugs and mind control methods on foreign targets for espionage. The experiment consisted of agents administering hallucinogens to foreign operatives to manipulate them into sharing secrets. Testing included substances like LSD, psychotropics, and other drugs. A quote from this document: Delta protocols explore foreign use of MK Ultra methods with minimal liability. Minimal liability? So, next in 1960, we had Operation Spellbinder. Overview of this was the project aimed to test hypnosis or military personnel, exploring whether they could be compelled to act against orders or commit acts unconsciously. The experiment consisted of soldiers being hypnotized to see if they could follow harmful orders without question, including simulated attacks on fellow personnel. Right? And this just goes back to me talking about, what do we even know about wars? All of this stuff was started way before any of the wars, way before all of this Nazi stuff, way before any of this stuff that's going on in today. And it really does make you think, was this even the act of people, or was this the act of a certain group? You know what I mean? So in 1968, you had Project Often, and this is the one where it was really hard to find a lot of information on this, and I'm going to go between my notebook and this as well because I just have different notes. But the CIA delved into supernatural research under Project Often, investigating phenomena like psychic abilities, curses, and even occult practices. This one was a bit crazy to me, and just a little bit more about that. MK often tested the psychological effects of rituals, summoning techniques, and curses. In some reports, subjects underwent psychological breakdowns or claimed to have experienced paranormal phenomenon. Rumors suggest rituals were performed in abandoned buildings where agents experimented with supernatural spiritual possession or tried to weaponize fear-inducing apparitions. Things that happened that was a mishap was some operatives were reportedly traumatized by these experiments, and a few left the CIA after claiming they had encountered malevolent forces. There is little documentation on the results, but whispers of paranormal outcomes and inexplicable events surround these sessions. A quote from MK Often, it says, seeks to understand and replicate supernatural effects, potential weapons of fear, right? Understanding that fear is the lowest vibration. And right, I think that oftentimes our thoughts do and can manifest these things like what they're talking about. They were trying to summon demons and trying to do all these different things. And when you're in a state of fear, which is why the religious movement, all these different things, they always push on us. It's always fear-based. And so it's interesting that they talk about it in this operation. So in 1947, they had Project Chatter, an early mind control effort focusing on using truth serums like scopolamine on prisoners of war and suspected spies. Prisoners were dosed with chemicals to see if they'd involuntarily reveal information. The drugs often caused disorientation and paranoia, testing whether subjects reveal secrets under chemical influence. Crazy, right? Like, what is this, a movie? Like, I can't even believe. So this one was in 1972. It was called Project Third Eye. So Project Third Eye was to test the effects of strobe lights and sound frequencies on brainwave manipulation. Subjects were exposed to strobe lights and sounds intended to alter mental states. In some trials, participants experienced hallucinations or temporary psychosis. Some of the mishaps that happened during this was prolonged exposure to lights and sounds resulted in some subjects experiencing migraines or seizures, So Project Stargate, 1978. This program, run jointly with the Department of Defense, focused on remote viewing. This is one of my favorite, one of the first ones I ever read and got into. Or psychic espionage. Experiments consisted of psychics attempted to locate objects or people from afar. In a few cases, some remote viewers reported accurately describing military sites. Remote viewing may offer intelligence advantages otherwise inaccessible. So I just wrote a paper about consciousness creating reality, and I referenced the Stargate project in there. And they had a guy who was just so good at this. He could name all kinds of things. Like, he would even be able to tell you like what the ships look like and what certain things look like just in different countries. And they would have these photos taken with like satellites, and they matched perfectly. And there was multiple others who were just as good as him. But this project to me just shows just how powerful we are, right? And the secret that they try to hide from us, that we really do have what people would call superpowers. It very much is supernatural. And, all of this was really a thing way back in the day. Telekinesis, telepathy, hypnosis, right? Still used to this day. Just understanding that we're so powerful, right? Because your consciousness is not your body. It's separate. It's two separate things, right? When we die, when this body goes away, energy doesn't die. It can only be transferred. So just because this deteriorates and goes away, your consciousness very much still continues, right? And that's why I believe in reincarnation. And, this just goes to show the power of remote viewing and being able to astral project. And the Bible also talks about being able to astral project. But understanding that your consciousness, and that's what so many of these projects are about, consciousness and how to control the conscious and how to use the conscious for supernatural things. And yeah, I just find it super, super interesting, to be quite honest. But some more, like, another crazy one is, hold on. Operation Black Widow in 1973. An overview of this is highly secretive program allegedly tested the possibility of thought implantation where ideas or emotions could be remotely influenced in unaware subjects. This project utilizes sound frequencies, subliminal messages, and hypnotic suggestion to alter behavior at a distance. Details on this: subjects in public spaces were exposed to faint ultrasonic frequencies paired with subliminal messages. Some participants reportedly showed signs of mood alterations or became highly suggestible, with follow-ups indicating implanted ideas they believed were their own. Operatives even attempted to implant violent thoughts, raising serious ethical concerns. Some test subjects exhibited paranoia or aggressive behavior, reportedly without knowing why. In extreme cases, subjects required psychiatric hospitalization. Black Widow aims for precision in controlling human behavior from afar, implanting ideas as if it's their own. And I very much do think that this still happens today. You guys, I don't think we understand just how everything has been misconstrued and how so much of this is going on, right? I talked about in my TikTok video just yesterday about how they changed the music frequency from 432 to 440 hertz. And there were so many projects on or experiments on just the frequency, right? Because everything is frequency and what that does to influence us. And the whole reason why they changed, all of the frequencies is because they understand this. So it was the Rockefellers. You got to understand their family is a part of all of these CIA. They implement them everywhere, not just their family, multiple families. But in 1936, American Standard Association, now known as the ANSI, adopted A equals 440 hertz as standard in the U.S., which influenced other countries, right? So then in 1939, there was a conference held in London, recommended the new 440 hertz adopted by the ISO. And then in 1975, the International Organization for Standardization established A equals 440 hertz as the standard pitch for tuning. And I was just going through books and stuff talking about this. One of the experiments that they did was acoustic weaponry. They wanted to test the effects of sound and frequencies. Some involve acoustic frequencies used for behavioral influence. And you often wonder and think to yourself, like, how and why do these people that are in the music industry get paid so much, right? It very much has such an impact on us, especially music. It's one thing that people use to cope and to heal and to be able to get through things. And I don't think we understand that a lot of the music we listen to is not dumbing us down, but just putting us in this low frequency, this low vibrational energy. And, when you're constantly being hit with, right, ELF, one of their projects was ELF, and it was electrical low frequency, and they would just emit that into the air. And we have to understand that this has an effect on us. You wonder why so many people are just so angry all the time, walking around so mad. Just so much about the world that I really think is going on that I really don't think people are talking about, or they just push it aside as it's just conspiracies, and it really isn't. Like, all of this stuff is documented, right? It isn't like these documents were written last year. No, you can see the document, the dates on it. It'll say 1943 with old writing, and then it'll say at the very top, released in 2013. It's mind-blowing to me. So when I was going through, just to get back on the 440 hertz thing a little bit, I was reading an essay, and this guy was talking about how Prince, the musician, he went live in 2014, and he was promoting his new album at the time, and he had, millions of people. So he had so many comments, and he wasn't replying back to anybody. But one guy left a comment, and he said, "Greetings, please address the importance of all music being tuned to 432 hertz." And Prince decided to reply to him, and it was the only guy he replied to the whole time, which actually sparked controversy. And I'm pretty sure his Facebook and stuff got taken down shortly after. But he replied back with a web link, and on the web link, it was full of documents and videos and recordings from people like Albert Einstein, Nikola Tesla, that talked about how we need to rethink making 440 hertz the standard hertz for music. And I found that super interesting, right? Just how many people were aware. And, I think a lot of this stuff is pushed aside, and we think of this stuff as like, oh, New Age movement, and people are just not getting into conspiracies. You guys, all the books that I look into and read are from the 1800s, 1500s, 1600s. So many people were aware of this going on. And I think where the disconnect was that they just didn't have it as easily as accessible as us, right? They didn't have TikTok and all these things to just be able to share as easily. And I'm sure they were looked at much crazier than we are now. But very much so, they were looking into this stuff, and people were awake back then just as much as they are now. It just wasn't talked about as much, right? And I think that there's this huge movement where people think that all this is like New Age, and it's all just people thinking they know everything, but it really is so much information out there. And I really wanted to make this video today just to kind of get you guys' opinion and open people's mind up to the fact that, maybe we really are still under all these experiments, MK Ultra, and they really are still emitting all these low frequencies and using these experiments on us still to this day, right, with our music, and even just with propaganda, guys. You have to understand there's thousands of people that work in the news, the journalists. All these people are on the CIA's payroll. I was just watching a podcast with a guy who used to be a CIA agent, and what happens is these guys sign NDAs when they first go into like do this stuff, right? So they can never talk about this stuff. Their whole life will be over. They'll be killed. All these things will happen to them if they come out with this information, and that is why a lot of people don't speak up on it. But you'll have these people that they call whistleblowers, like this man, and they tell the truth. There's a book called The Committee of 300 that I read. Such a great book. It's also the same guy. He was a CIA agent, and he talked about how when he was in Africa, he came across some documents that was showing what was going to happen in the future, and it was all agendas. Like he talked about the feminist movement. He talked about all these different movements that were propaganda. They were going to do it to right, make us go against each other. It's always trying to make us go against each other, the politics, everything. And it truly is never about, right, us, left, right, black, white, none of this. It's about the 1% against us. How long can we be in control, and how long can we control the people, and how long can we, have just their minds under our belts. And I think it's super important to get into this stuff to understand just who we are. And I do believe, and I always talk about it, once you go through all these experiments and you go through these conspiracies and you understand that this stuff is not conspiracies, it takes you so deep into spirituality, or for me personally. And, the goal is not to stay in this phase of anger and, oh my God, the government, it is not the government. It is very much a small group of people that control everything. But, I forgot what I was saying, but yeah, it's important to understand this stuff, right? And to not stay in that anger phase, right? That puts you on lower frequency when you're angry and when you're coming from a place of anger, but using this, transmuting it to take you further into your journey, to understand deeper who you are. And it is interesting to go through these experiments, right? Another one I don't think I talked about was the hemisync. I forgot the main name of it, but they still teach it at Monroe Institute. It's where they synced the left and right hemispheres of the brain, and they were able to actually, on the document, I read it. It tells you the very first paragraph is an affirmation to use, and it's basically how to astral project. And it teaches you this. It's step by step. There's pictures in there that explain just the brain and how things work. So being able to use this stuff and transmute it and use it for positive, right? But yeah, that's really all I wanted to talk about in today's video. I really want people to go dive deep into this stuff. Let me know even crazier. I want to know about the most craziest exotic experiments that maybe I haven't even looked at, because I haven't found anything that's just like, oh my gosh, like all these are obviously crazy, but maybe somebody will have something that will make me just be like disgusted and flabbergasted. I want to look into the craziest, most deepest things. So if anybody has anything that I didn't mention, please feel free to comment, and I promise I will go deep into it. But yeah, if you stayed this long, thank you so much. And if anybody wants a little update on my no smoking, it's been almost 2 weeks. Monday will be 2 weeks for me, so I'm super happy about that. But yeah, if you're not already following me on TikTok, just because TikTok, I post videos every day, it's just much quicker and easier, right? So follow me on there, Ashley Eckerly _ And yeah, I hope y'all have the best week. Go dive into some documents. Hey, somebody request something from them and let me know how that goes. But yeah, I hope y'all have the best week.